Prince Andrew is demanding a trial by jury and has formally denied all the allegations against him as he gave a court in New York his official response to allegations of sexual assault.
When it comes to the crown, drama is never far away, and right at the center is Prince Andrew, a man whose name has become almost inseparable from scandal. From his ties to Jeffrey Epstein to allegations of misconduct that refuse to fade, his once royal reputation is buried under endless controversy. And now, just when it seemed things couldn't get worse, a former maid has stepped forward with shocking claims about his true behavior. Could this be the final blow that pushes his reputation past the point of no return? Stick with us, because we're diving into every detail. Prince Andrew's former maid reveals the truth about him. The fall of a royal is never quiet, but few have fallen with as much noise or disgrace as Prince Andrew. Once hailed as the Queen's favorite son, he now stands as one of the most scandal-stained figures in the monarchy's history. In 2023, the Crown itself cut ties, stripping him of his honorary military titles and silencing the use of His Royal Highness. For a man raised on privilege, it was a public humiliation unlike anything the House of Windsor had ever seen. But while the world focused on lawsuits, headlines, and rumored connections to Jeffrey Epstein, another story was brewing. Not one born in courtrooms or tabloids, but within the palace walls themselves. A story told not by lawyers or journalists, but by someone who lived in the shadows of his daily life, his former maid. Her name is Charlotte Briggs. And what she revealed about Prince Andrew is enough to make the scandals already attached to his name look tame. So what did Charlotte Briggs say? Keep watching to find out. Charlotte entered Buckingham Palace in 1996, a 21-year-old from Yorkshire who thought she'd landed a once-in-a-lifetime role. At first, she was tasked with routine duties, cleaning offices, taking out bins, and even sharing small human moments with royals who treated her kindly. She remembered Prince Edward holding the door open for her, an act of courtesy she hadn't expected. For 6 months, her job was simple. Then came the assignment no one wanted, serving Prince Andrew. What should have been a mark of trust quickly revealed itself as a nightmare. Andrew was 36 at the time, newly divorced from Sarah Ferguson, and living back in the palace on what was known as the nursery floor. Yet despite being a grown man, a military veteran, and a prince of the realm, his behavior, according to Charlotte, was more like that of a spoiled child than a war hero. She recalled her first taste of his temper, a rant over curtains. Andrew, seated just a few feet away, demanded she run up and down stairs to adjust them until they were exactly how he liked. When a sliver of light peeked through the top, his fury exploded. "Can't you do anything right?" he barked. Charlotte was left in tears, shocked that something so trivial could provoke such rage. This, she explained, was not an isolated incident. Tantrums were part of the job. His bed had to be turned down with military precision, pillows embroidered with the royal crest placed in the exact center, pajamas laid out neatly, and most bizarre of all, his teddy bears positioned just so. Miss a step, and Andrew would erupt. It wasn't just the demands that unsettled her. It was hypocrisy. This man fought in the Falklands, she remembered thinking. Yet he couldn't even close his own curtains. By contrast, other royals exuded dignity. Charles and Edward, she said, were wonderful. Princess Anne kept her distance but showed quiet respect. Andrew, however, was the rotten apple, the one who spoilt what could have been the job of a lifetime. Still, there were surreal moments. Charlotte earned £600 a month and even found herself standing on the royal balcony during Trooping the Colour. She was hugged by Nelson Mandela, a memory she cherished. But behind the grandeur, her daily reality was dominated by Andrew's petty demands. And then there was Sarah Ferguson. Despite their divorce in 1992, Charlotte claimed Andrew kept his ex-wife close in spirit, if not in body. His wardrobe, she alleged, still held her wedding dress. Her makeup remained neatly laid out on his dressing table, as though she might walk back in at any moment. For Charlotte, it was unsettling, a sign he hadn't let go, even as the world assumed he had moved on. Her stories didn't surface immediately. They came years later, in 2022, just as Andrew's life imploded under the weight of Virginia Giuffre's lawsuit. Giuffre alleged she was trafficked by Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and forced to have sex with Andrew when she was a teenager. Andrew denied it fiercely, but the damage was done. Against this backdrop, Charlotte spoke out, her memories adding another layer to the portrait of a man who demanded loyalty but offered little humanity in return. And Charlotte wasn't alone in exposing the strange inner world of the Duke of York. Former palace guard Paul Page corroborated her accounts in an ITV documentary, Ghislaine, Prince Andrew, and the Pedophile. He revealed Andrew's obsession with stuffed toys, claiming his bed was covered with 50 or 60 of them. Maids were given a laminated diagram showing the exact placement of each bear. If one was out of order, Andrew's temper would explode. Even outsiders noticed. Writer Elizabeth Day recalled visiting Buckingham Palace in 2019, where she waited in a corridor opposite an oversized teddy bear perched on a chair. When she later asked Andrew about it, he laughed and explained it was a wedding gift from Sarah Ferguson. What might have seemed quirky in another context suddenly seemed strange when layered onto years of testimony about his childish demands. Through Charlotte's eyes, the myth of royal dignity crumbled. Andrew wasn't just a disgraced prince facing legal battles. He was, in her words, a bad apple, a man so consumed by entitlement that even the simplest tasks became someone else's burden. Her account was a glimpse behind the gilded curtain, and it was anything but flattering. For Buckingham Palace, silence was the chosen response. When pressed about Charlotte's claims, no comment came. It was the same tactic used for years: ignore, outlast, and hope the noise fades. But times have changed. Silence, once a shield, now amplifies suspicion. What makes Charlotte's revelations so powerful isn't just their content, but their timing. They surfaced at Andrew's lowest point, when public opinion had already turned against him. Her words reinforced the narrative that the man who once stood proudly beside his mother on the balcony was not a victim of circumstance, but an architect of his own downfall. As damning as Charlotte's account was, it wasn't the only one. More jarring revelations about Prince Andrew. Over the years, others have stepped forward with stories that paint the Duke of York in an even darker light. Stories of cruelty, entitlement, and outbursts that chipped away at the carefully crafted royal image. And now, a new book is adding fuel to the fire. Veteran royal biographer Andrew Loney's explosive new work, entitled The Rise and Fall of the House of York, pulls back the curtain on Andrew once again. According to excerpts obtained by the Daily Mail, the prince's behavior towards staff wasn't just demanding, it was vicious. In one particularly shocking account, Andrew reportedly called a palace staffer a Fing imbecile for the crime of not using the Queen Mother's full title. The incident dates back to 2005, when a severe storm ravaged Northern Ireland. Afterward, Andrew asked David Anderson, the head of Hillsborough Castle, whether the property had suffered any serious damage. Anderson answered honestly, mentioning that a tree planted by the Queen Mother had been destroyed. But instead of gratitude, he was met with a cutting silence. Andrew then mocked him, repeating the phrase in a sneering tone. "Did you mean Queen Elizabeth? The Queen Mother?" What came next was even harsher. Andrew allegedly grilled the staffer, demanding to know how long he had worked for the royal family. When Anderson replied that he had been serving since 1984, the Duke snapped, "And you still don't know the proper way to refer to my grandmother? Get out!" It wasn't a slip of temper. It was a glimpse into the way Andrew, behind closed doors, dealt with those around him. According to Loney, the prince had a catchphrase he barked regularly at palace staff. "I want this done, and I want this done now." Do it. Orders weren't requests. They were commands, and any failure, however small, risked public humiliation. But Andrew's treatment of staff wasn't the only revelation in Loney's book. The biographer went further, pulling back the curtain on Andrew's strained ties with the younger generation of royals. His relationship with Princes William and Harry, according to the book, was problematic. And in one shocking claim, Loney alleged that things once turned physical. The excerpt describes a fiery confrontation between Andrew and Harry, sparked by comments the Duke had allegedly made about Meghan Markle. Behind Harry's back, Andrew was said to have dismissed the actress-turned-duchess as nothing more than an opportunist. The insult struck a nerve. Loney claimed Harry confronted his uncle in a heated argument that ended with a punch to the face. The Duke of York, according to the story, was left with a bloody nose. It's a claim that spread quickly, but it didn't go unchallenged. Harry's camp fired back immediately, branding the account as gross inaccuracies and damaging and defamatory remarks. A representative for the Duke of Sussex was clear. There had never been a physical fight between Harry and Andrew, nor had Andrew ever called Meghan an opportunist. Still, the allegations add yet another layer to Andrew's already fragile public standing. First came the lawsuits, then the Maid's confessions, and now the words of a respected biographer tying his name not only to entitlement but also to family conflict. Each story chips away at the image of a once proud prince, leaving behind something far less flattering. For Andrew, silence has become the default strategy. The palace offered no comment on Charlotte Briggs' stories, and they've given none here either. But as more insiders and authors step forward with their accounts, one thing is becoming clear. Prince Andrew's reputation isn't just damaged, it's unraveling. And with every revelation, the question grows louder. How much more is still to come? The truth is, Andrew's fall from grace wasn't triggered by a single revelation. His downfall wasn't sudden. It built up slowly, scandal after scandal, until the weight of it all dragged him down. The sexual allegations against Prince Andrew. For years he was seen as the favorite child, the one who could do no wrong. But behind the royal walls, Andrew was making choices and connections that would ruin him. The biggest stain on his reputation came from his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein. Through Ghislaine Maxwell, whom Andrew had known since her university days, he was introduced to Epstein back in 1999. At the time, it just looked like another high society friendship. The three of them were often seen together, moving through luxury homes and private parties. Epstein and Maxwell were even invited to Balmoral, the Queen's private estate in Scotland, a sign of how close Andrew had let them in. But soon, everything came crashing down. When Epstein was convicted in 2008 for sex crimes involving a minor, that should have been the end of the friendship. But Andrew didn't walk away. 2 years later, in December 2010, photographs showed him in New York, casually opening the door to Epstein's townhouse and strolling through Central Park with him. The images were damning. Andrew later insisted he cut ties with Epstein that same month, but emails told a different story. In February 2011, 2 months after he claimed to have ended things, Andrew wrote Epstein a message telling him to keep in close touch and hinting they would play some more soon. To make matters worse, that message came on the same day a photo surfaced of Andrew standing next to Epstein's victim, Virginia Giuffre, who was just 17 at the time, with Ghislaine Maxwell by her side. Giuffre's claims would haunt Andrew for years. She accused him of sexually abusing her on 3 separate occasions while she was still a minor under U.S. law: on Epstein's private island, in Maxwell's London townhouse, and at Epstein's Manhattan mansion. Andrew denied it all, saying the encounters never happened. But the evidence and her persistence kept the scandal alive. By 2019, Andrew decided to finally defend himself publicly, and it turned into one of the most disastrous interviews in royal history. Sitting down with the BBC's Emily Maitlis, Andrew tried to explain his side. He argued that Giuffre's memory of him sweating in a nightclub couldn't be true because he had been unable to sweat since the Falklands War. He also claimed he couldn't have been with her on the night in question because he had been at Pizza Express in Woking with his daughter, Princess Beatrice. The explanation sounded bizarre, almost laughable, and the lack of empathy for Epstein's victims made things even worse. The public backlash was immediate. Instead of clearing his name, the interview destroyed what was left of his reputation. Within days, Andrew announced he was stepping back from royal duties. He admitted his ties to Epstein had become a major distraction for the family. Even then, the Queen tried to show loyalty. She appeared with Andrew at Prince Philip's memorial service in 2021, walking into Westminster Abbey with him at her side. But her support couldn't shield him forever. By January 2022, with Giuffre's lawsuit moving forward in the U.S., Buckingham Palace took decisive action. Andrew was stripped of his military titles and royal patronages, and he could no longer use his Royal Highness. Positions he had once bragged about, such as Colonel of the Grenadier, Guards, Honorary Air Commodore of RAF Lossiemouth, and many others, were handed over to other royals. The disgrace was public and painful. And then came the settlement. In March 2022, Andrew reached a deal with Giuffre, agreeing to pay her millions of pounds to avoid a trial. Reports suggested the figure was as high as £12 million. As part of the settlement, he was also expected to make a donation to a charity for victims' rights. But people wanted to know, where did the money come from? Did it come from Andrew's personal fortune, or did the Queen, or even Charles, help cover the cost? The palace never gave a clear answer, and the suspicion never faded. By then, Andrew's name was permanently linked with scandal. And just when it seemed things couldn't get any worse, another bombshell dropped. In late 2024, one of Andrew's close contacts, Chinese businessman Yang Tengbo, was barred from entering the UK. Authorities alleged he was tied to the Chinese Communist Party and posed a national security risk. Tengbo had reportedly visited royal residences at Andrew's invitation. Andrew insisted that nothing sensitive was ever discussed and claimed he cut ties as soon as concerns were raised. But by then, the damage was done. Yet again, his judgment was under fire. Piece by piece, Andrew's image crumbled. The leaked emails, the photograph with Giuffre, the disastrous BBC interview, the titles stripped from him, the expensive settlement, and even the Chinese spy scandal, each one chipped away at whatever respect he had left. Once the proud son of the late Queen, Andrew had become the most disgraced member of the royal family. He went from being celebrated as a war hero to being remembered for scandal, shame, and denial. And while he has continued to insist on his innocence, the truth is that his reputation never recovered. The Duke of York had fallen, and for many, there was no coming back. But to understand how steep that fall truly was, you have to go back to the very beginning, long before Epstein, lawsuits, or scandal. Because Andrew's story didn't start in disgrace. It began in secrecy, in a moment that caught even the Queen by surprise. Background on Prince Andrew. Prince Andrew's story begins with secrecy. In the summer of 1959, Queen Elizabeth II was on a 45-day tour of Canada when she discovered she was pregnant. The palace kept it quiet during the tour, and it wasn't until August, after she returned to London, that the news was finally made public. On the 19th of February 1960, at 3:30 in the afternoon, the Queen gave birth in the Belgian suite at Buckingham Palace. Andrew was her third child, her second son, and the first baby born to a reigning British monarch since Princess Beatrice back in 1857. Less than 2 months later, on the 8th of April, he was baptized in the music room at Buckingham Palace. Like his siblings Charles, Anne, and Edward, Andrew's early years were shaped by a governess who oversaw his education in the palace before he was sent away to Heatherdown School near Ascot. In 1973, he followed the family tradition and entered Gordonstown in Scotland, where his father and brother had also studied. Andrew developed a reputation there, earning the nickname the Sniggerer because of his constant habit of cracking off-color jokes and laughing far too loudly at them. In 1977, he crossed the Atlantic for 6 months on an exchange program at Lakefield College School in Canada before returning to finish his studies. 2 years later, in July 1979, he left Gordonstown with A-levels in English, history, and economics. That same year, the palace announced that Andrew would follow another royal path: military service. In November 1978, his intention to join the Royal Navy was made public. By December, he was being tested, interviewed, and examined at every level: RAF, Biggin Hill, HMS Daedalus, and HMS Sultan. He officially signed on for 12 years of service in May 1979. That September, he became a midshipman at Britannia Royal Naval College in Dartmouth, and even completed the grueling Royal Marines All-Arms Commando course, earning his Green Beret. By 1981, he was a sub-lieutenant, and soon after, he was training to fly helicopters. He started with the Gazelle and then moved on to the Sea King, a much larger, more advanced craft. In 1982, he joined 820 Naval Air Squadron, serving aboard HMS Invincible. That year, history came calling. Argentina invaded the Falkland Islands and the Royal Navy sailed south. The British government worried about the Queen's son being put in danger and wanted him moved to a desk job. The Queen, however, insisted he remain with his ship, and so Andrew stayed aboard Invincible, flying missions as a Sea King co-pilot. He took part in anti-submarine operations, missile decoy runs, and casualty evacuations, and even witnessed the Argentine attack on the SS Atlantic Conveyor. By the end of the war, when Invincible sailed home to Portsmouth, his parents were there waiting, among families of the crew, to welcome the ship back. Argentina had even reportedly planned, though never carried out, an assassination attempt on him in July 1982. For all his privilege, Andrew had faced real danger, and commanders like Nigel Ward later described him as an excellent pilot with promise. After the war, his naval career continued. He trained to fly the Lynx helicopter, rose through the ranks, and in 1984 was promoted to lieutenant and even appointed as the Queen's personal aide-de-camp. Over the years, he served on multiple ships: HMS Brazen, HMS Edinburgh, and HMS Campbelltown. He became a helicopter warfare instructor, took part in deployments across the Mediterranean, Far East, and North Atlantic, and was steadily promoted until he reached the rank of commander in 1999. By 2001, he left active naval service after more than 2 decades, later receiving honorary promotions to Rear Admiral in 2010 and Vice Admiral in 2015. But in January 2022, after mounting controversy, he stopped using his honorary titles. Over 150 veterans had signed a letter asking the Queen to strip him of his military roles, leaving him with only his service rank. Outside the Navy, Andrew's personal life was never far from the spotlight. In 1981, before the Falklands War, he met American photographer and actress Koo Stark. Their relationship was serious, and many believed she was his one true love. But palace pressure and relentless press attention forced them apart in 1983. Even years later, when Andrew faced accusations tied to Jeffrey Epstein, Stark publicly defended him. By 1985, though, Andrew had reconnected with Sarah Ferguson, a childhood acquaintance. Their romance blossomed quickly, and on 23 July 1986, they married at Westminster Abbey in a wedding broadcast to millions. That same day, he was made Duke of York, Earl of Inverness, and Baron Killyleagh. The couple had 2 daughters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, and for a time, their marriage seemed strong. Sarah's lively personality felt refreshing compared to the formality of the royal family, and the pair projected happiness to the public. But cracks soon appeared. Andrew's naval career kept him traveling, while the Duchess of York became the target of endless media criticism. In March 1992, they announced their separation, claiming it was amicable. But by August, any hope of reconciliation vanished when the press published scandalous photos of Sarah with John Bryan, a financial advisor, sucking on her toes. The humiliation was complete. Their divorce was finalized in May 1996, but despite the collapse, Andrew and Sarah maintained an unusually close bond. He continued to speak fondly of her years later, saying they had managed to raise their children together in a way few divorced couples had achieved. Yet their closeness also brought problems. In 2010, Sarah was caught in a sting operation by News of the World, filmed accepting cash while claiming Andrew would provide top-level business contacts for the right price. Though Andrew himself wasn't implicated, the scandal splashed mud on his name. Sarah later compared him to a knight on a white charger after he cleared her debts, but her ties to Jeffrey Epstein raised fresh questions when it emerged he had helped her financially too. By the 2000s, Andrew had moved into Royal Lodge, Windsor, and though divorced, Sarah eventually returned to live there as well. Their arrangement, unusual for ex-spouses, fueled speculation, but Andrew carried on with royal duties, business connections, and charity work until the Epstein scandal exploded. Then came the stories about his behavior behind palace walls. Former staff accused him of having a volatile temper, swearing at servants, screaming over misplaced teddy bears, or laughing off complaints when his dogs bit staff. Charlotte Briggs, a former maid, described how he reduced her to tears for not closing curtains properly, unlike his brothers Charles and Edward, or his father Philip, whom she remembered as gentlemanly. Other accounts painted a picture of a man difficult to work for, brusque, entitled, and often crude. The accusations weren't limited to staff. A massage therapist, Emma Gruenbaum, recalled how Andrew made constant sexual remarks during sessions, asking invasive questions about her private life until she stopped working with him. Former Royal Protection Officer Paul Page claimed the prince routinely entertained different women at the palace, and when one was denied entry by security, he allegedly insulted an officer in crude terms. All of this built a picture that clashed with his public image as a naval officer and royal duke. By the late 2000s, his reputation was spiraling, especially as pressure mounted over Epstein. His disastrous 2019 BBC Newsnight interview, where he denied sweating, claimed he was at Pizza Express instead of with Virginia Giuffre, and failed to show empathy for victims, cemented public outrage. Within days, he stepped back from royal duties. By 2022, stripped of his titles and facing legal settlement payments, Prince Andrew had fallen further than anyone could have imagined for a man once thought to be the Queen's favorite child. And yet, despite everything, he remains in the public eye, still residing at Royal Lodge, still carrying the title of Duke of York, even as campaigns in York, Inverness, and Killyleagh call for those honors to be taken away. His story is no longer one of naval heroics or royal tradition. It is a story of privilege colliding with scandal, of a prince who went from flying helicopters in war to being grounded by his own choices. And the shadow of those choices lingers, leaving one question still hanging. How much more is yet to come for Prince Andrew? What are your thoughts on Prince Andrew? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.